Hey there, welcome back. Thanks for joining us here, Simply Worldbuilding. Today we're gonna go back and this actually marks sort of like the second chapter where we've kind of glossed over a good fair share of details to help you get some roots put down and leave those little dangling threads that we like to talk about so much. And now, going forward, we're gonna go back and we're gonna jump back into some things we've already talked about and go in with a whole lot more detail. We'll probably end up doing more than likely 3 passes, so
yeah, I think that's probably a good take. It's going to be like broad details and concepts. First pass. Second, you start to go in and try and connect the dots a little bit. And third is like when you come down to very specifics, when it comes down to maybe like
refined. That's when you start, having people and actual dates and very specific things.
Well, I think what would probably define it the best is like, on that final pass is when you make things like playable.
Totally.
At least in a game perspective. Yeah. Like, that's when you're actually making the physical dungeon for your players to go into, or the physical pieces of the city in which they wish to venture inside. I mean, feel free to go over it as many times as you see fit, but the main idea of having just like a first one, a second one where you elaborate on those details, and then a third one where you're putting everything down physically is probably like the basis of the formula.
Yeah. So we're going to start doing our second pass now, where we start connecting some more of those threads and we start kind of getting things into closer to a finished state. And for our first episode, we're going to kind of go right back to the beginning where more or less it all started. One of the first few things we talked about. And that's going to be the world turtle, aka the floating continent. So that's, we're going to start working a little bit on that. Did you know where you wanted to start?
I think one thing that I was kind of curious about is, were we going to nail down the cycle that we had sort of set as sort of a basis for what we were going to do? Because I know at the very least we were thinking longer than an annual cycle. What we were kind of just going with for now was a 16-year cycle, which I like, but I was curious if you had any changes on that, or if that felt good, because I think we were thinking, like 4 years in sort of quadrants of the world.
Yeah.
Does that seem about right still? Should we stick with that?
I think it sounds pretty good. I like the idea of it being like a once-in-a-generation thing, so even longer. Okay. Because then that makes it so impactful when it comes around. But that also kind of puts us at the mercy of, like, if it's in one location for 25 years or whatever, then that is like a semi-permanent thing.
It would like lose its importance a little bit, I think. Like, people would take for granted the fact that it's there.
Totally. So I think that maybe the most sort of balanced like middle ground would possibly be going for something like a 16-year cycle, give or take. Because I like the idea of, despite the fact that it's not like stationary, I think that it should move.
Yeah, it doesn't just move and sit
slowly.
For 4 years. But it sits in like a sort of area for that sort of long.
And I like the idea of it being in kind of like 4 cycles, in the same way that, like, there are 4 seasons, and then there's like 4 seasons in a year, and then there's 4 years in a cycle of this thing, and this thing has 4 cycles, and that kind of thing. I like that.
It sort of fractals out a little bit. Yeah. Okay.
So I like that a lot. I'm happy to commit to that, I think.
Okay, for sure.
But even in those cycles, like, let's say that, for one of those cycles, it's kind of in the general neighborhood of this continent, and so like it may pass by your country once or maybe twice in that cycle, but for the rest of the time it's just frickin' around like in the general neighborhood of your continent. Not necessarily like stationed outside of your city for like a couple of months or anything. But I also like the idea that it's like predictable enough where, like, a sailor like was at the tavern or whatever and said, we passed it on the way here, like it's it's coming around, like it'll probably be here in 2 months, and then that's enough time for people to start to like get the ball rolling on, well, let's start the celebration kind of thing, and then it shows up and everybody gets the day off or whatever, however unique places celebrate.
Yeah.
But I like the idea that it's like semi-predictable. Like if you see it coming and you know that it's going to be here in a matter of time.
Yeah.
But not so predictable that they're like, well, on October the 18th of 2036 it'll be here, and then 2054, you know, not that level of predictable.
Yeah, totally.
But long story short, I think that the 16-year give or take cycle is... I like that.
I do like that as well, because it's not generational, but like how often do you get to see it? Like, like not too many times in your life.
Best case scenario, you're still looking at like, I mean, depending on your life expectancy in ye olden days, maybe like 3 times. And that's assuming that you're at home, available on that day or whatever, because if you miss it, then it's, you know, probably gone for the next almost 2 decades.
Yeah, exactly.
And I want to throw back to, I think we talked about doing like warm water, cold water, warm water, cold water.
That was kind of the next thing I wanted to ask is, so we have kind of our map pulled up here, is where exactly are these regions going to be?
I think that being like warm water, cold water, the way that we've got like our 2 main continents that we've spent the most time talking about and building here, for the most part, where our equator is at on like the northern tip of these continents is going to probably all be colder water. And then on the southern end, because there's a little bit less continent on the southern side of the equator than there is on the north, you're probably safe to call it like anywhere on the south of these continents is warmer water, as well as like if it were in a warmer cycle, that is when there's potential for it to actually sort of like come into this like sea or this channel in between them as well. So I was thinking that the sort of the cycle would be not only just like a habit, but also for its own like hunting reasons, where it survives for 4 years here eating all the fish or whatever, and then for whatever like natural reason it kind of needs to go back to the other side of the scale to like balance out its body temperature, or for a different kind of nutrients or something like that.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that, you know, I'm no biologist or anything, or nutritionist.
I'm a marine biologist.
Hoorah! I think it's safe to assume that there could be different nutrients in like colder climates and warmer climates. I think that it actually is proven, maybe, that warmer water things have way more like plankton and stuff like that versus colder water. But also,
what I was just gonna say is like the warm areas are kind of gonna share a bit of a ecosystem with each other, as well as the colder places. Like you're not gonna see a ton of mingling of stuff in between. And so doing it in like this warm, cold, and then warm area B and then cold area B is kind of the best way to balance it out, I feel, because it's like, okay, you could do cold area A and then cold area B, but then you're kind of still sharing that same ecosystem. So it's like not as productive as it would be. So like I agree for that reason as well, is what I'm saying. And then that way, like, you know, it's going to eat a fair amount of like a specific like level of life, creatures, and then it's going to leave and let that kind of like re-flourish again as well. So I like the idea of the like sort of back and forth, and it can also kind of like, as it goes around, like go up one side and then back down the other side into warm, and then back up, that kind of thing, and sort of rotate around these continents like that. Yeah, totally.
So we've got a pretty solid idea of how we want the cycles to go. Did you want to start talking about how like certain people will celebrate, or do you want to start talking about more like life on the turtle itself?
I was thinking how people would react to it, because I think not everyone's going to like the presence of this thing.
You know what? I was actually thinking about that this morning. I was thinking about this, like shower thoughts, you know how it goes. I was thinking
turtles.
That specifically because this is like, you know, despite it being pretty unanimously a good thing, nevertheless it is still a Leviathan. And so I think that when it goes up to like that cold water cycle, and it's in ye old neighborhood of the city-states, whose specific thing is like, we want to annihilate titans for our benefit and harvest them and stuff, that would actually be like a pretty big point of contention is like they get the, you know, their like celebration for, oh, it's time, it's coming back, is like
sharpening their spears.
The hunt is starting. Yeah.
Live, laugh, the hunt. Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, the way we've thought of this thing is it's mostly positive for sure, but I can't help but think like what I'm thinking is there might actually be negative connotations depending on where you live and the geography. Because also picture the fact that when this thing rolls up, there's probably going to be some serious tidal events.
Sure. Sure.
Now, where I picture that happening the most is anywhere in the large area of water in between both continents. Now, where we have that happen the most is up to us, but so sort of nailing down locations really quickly first, or its path is sort of what I was thinking, is my thought on how it might do these cycles is it might start down here just under Feros and under like the sort of Elven area or the Plains area, just at the bottom of that continent, the southernmost area, and that is where it sort of hangs out. And in its transition, it'll go up around the continent this way, around the swamp area, and then hang out in this sort of northern pocket that we have on the top here. So that'll be sort of A and B, is my thought. But then as it comes down to, you know, warm area B, just under the jungle and around the desert sort of area, that's when it'll pass through, I'm not sure if you could even call that a canal, that's just what I want to say about it, but through the area between continents, and then come out here, and then go up, and then pass through the canal again to come back here.
Well, keep in mind we've got more continents to toss in as well.
Yeah, totally.
Which I assume we're probably putting to either the east or west of these main two.
Okay.
So that also adds a little bit more complexity to the cycle too, so it's not always around just these continents. I do like the idea of it kind of doing like almost like a figure eight type situation.
Well, it's doing like almost like an infinity sign.
Yeah. But I think that we should add in that there is a even if it's slightly briefer, a time where it's off of this map and is on the other map of the other continents, and it's doing this little loop around there.
I was for the most part picturing those continents as being smaller than these ones by a decent margin and therefore more minor. And so I think in being in, let's say, warm area A, it's kind of going to be like, say we have another continent just over here, like it's going to be in that area, so it's going to interact with both at the same time. So that's why using this map as reference, because these are definitely the main land masses, and so just using them as reference is kind of what I meant. But yeah, so it like swoops up around on the east continent, it swoops up around the east side, goes through the middle, and then south on the west continent, west side, and it does this sort of figure eight thing. But what that would mean is that it passes through the center canal twice in the cycle. So that can have its effects as well. And in establishing that, what I think that means for the people of both Yothrumir and the areas of the triplet cities is this continent-sized turtle is going to take a serious turn, like right in, because it's coming from the top of the canal every time. And so what that's going to mean is basically a tsunami on one side and then the other side, depending on which direction it's coming from, which would mean a whole bunch of flooding, which means they would probably not like it very much. And now the other thing I wanted to say is I think for Yothrumir that's going to be less of a problem. Yes,
they're further away, for the most part, they're further away from the coast, and also at least a chunk of it is pretty cliffy.
They're just a generally higher elevated area. I picture more cliff faces at the coast at Yothrumir. Plus, also, if you kind of look, if you want to just like put it up here, Yothrumir has a decent amount of islands, which islands would break a certain amount of that shock.
Yeah, totally.
And so the actual coast proper would have less of a problem with that. The triplet cities and the city-states, don't have that luxury.
They don't have that.
The triplet cities, in fact, would probably take the brunt.
Well, absolutely, because what I'm looking at at the triplet cities there in the north, and then also at Feros, especially here, they're on the inside of like a bay.
Yeah.
And so it's going to kind of have like a funnel thing where this massive amount of water is pushing through and concentrating. Now, most of the cities in Feros are specifically designed to handle, you know, they're very, very water-based. They know that. They're smart about it. They've got cities that are built intentionally to protect against things like flooding and stuff like that. Like there's a lot of different like canal structures and stuff. I think that the capital city is going to be all right in Feros. I do think, however, some of the other cities like Alabat, Alimbor, and then also with the triplet cities and stuff like that, the ones that are on the inside of these bays that aren't necessarily constructed with that in mind, they might have a very bad time. Yeah.
I do notice that Feros also has a couple of islands. I'm not sure. That might break it a little bit. I don't think it's going to be nearly as effective, but I think Feros is... the triplet cities are, like, it's going to be a cycle. They're going to be semi-well adapted to, but there's only so much you can really account for it.
Yeah.
I don't see Feros as being one of the ones that necessarily really dislikes them.
No, I agree. I think that it's pretty big for them.
Because they're so huge into trade and stuff like that. And so I think that what's going to happen is, like, yeah, they might have more turbulent tides that time of year as it rolls through.
It's the kind of thing where it's like, okay, we know it's coming in.
Yeah.
Like, take your boat out into the water where the waves are going to be less impactful.
Yeah.
Because anybody who has seen like tsunami videos and stuff like that is going to know that as these waves get closer to the land, the waves get taller because the land underneath is up, and so are the waves. So if you sail your boat out into the water, the waves impact you a whole lot less. So it's like, pull up your nets, go out into the bay.
Yeah.
It'll be done in 45 minutes.
Yeah. And yeah, since they're such a rich place as well, I think like they would, like you say, like there's a certain amount of architecture and just general countermeasures.
Yeah.
They have this like for them, they have this gigantic bay to work with. And so they may have certain things that might assist in like breaking the force of the water as well, or something like that. So yeah, I feel like Feros kind of gets a pass from the wrath of the wave.
Yeah.
A little bit, but I definitely think, again, since they're going to be coming in from the top of this canal, it's going to take a sharp turn to come into the canal, and just that wave is going to crash against the triplet cities. Next cycle, it comes in, it's doing the same thing, but from the opposite direction. That wave is going to crash up against Yothremir very particularly hard, and everyone down in like the sort of middle to bottom of this, all they're going to have to deal with is just the waves of it traveling straight through, which is going to be pretty consistent. But when he's just taking the sharp corner, it's like the whole force of just like
initial D drifts into the corner. One other thing I thought, we'll bounce back to that, but one other impact I thought as it's traveling through this canal, we talked about the, like, pirates that exist in this wealthy nation in the desert.
Indeed.
I do think that it's very interesting that, like, not only I think will they probably want, you know, to maybe do a little raiding or something like that, but also I think that once this thing has passed through and there's so much more like nutrients in the water and fish and stuff like that, and so people are all sailing out to go and like get these bountiful harvests, that they're also going to be a little bit more active in pilfering these ships.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, also at the same time, like there's got to be some fallout from not only the waves but just the turtle passing through. Like some ships might just straight up get caught in the crossfire.
Surely.
In which case there's going to be more sunken ships, and just salvage is probably the better term for it, just going to be out in the water during this time, which the pirates would also like. So they're probably big fans.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that, I mean, that kind of covers those areas, the more relevant areas on the inside.
Yeah, I think that the turtle and the people on the turtle are probably going to catch a little bit of fighting, at least at some level, from especially the city-states and especially the pirates.
Yeah.
Everybody else, for the most part, if not positive and likes the fact that it's nearby, is at least neutral, whereas they might, you know, maybe they do feel positive about it, but because they want to fight or, you know, take its resources and whatever, or benefit in more malicious ways from it being in the nearby area.
Yeah, totally. Another one I wanted to bring up, because that's all the stuff on the inside here, and there's not really much on the outside on this side, but over here,
Yes. Yep.
we have the swamp area. Now, the swamp itself, I do not picture being a very friendly area. I don't think anyone does. But I also picture the ocean surrounding it being just as fucking bad. Just the general energy of the swamp end area itself is, I think it's gonna seep out into the ocean as well. Not in a like the swamp water gets out there. I think it's just that corner of the world fucking sucks.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have probably multiple water-based leviathans in the ocean lurking about. It's going to be a bad fucking time. And so, as such, any people who do actually live there aren't going to like the water.
Yeah.
They don't like the water. Water bad. Inland and outland, water bad.
That's true.
So what happens when you have a turtle that comes in and feeds nutrients to everything in the water? All of the stuff that, you know, gains from being in the water is going to get a lot bigger.
Yeah.
There's going to be more plentiful.
Yeah.
And so I think also the swamplands are probably specifically also going to not like the presence of the turtle.
Probably. And also, it's assumably a pretty low land, like low to sea level too. So like, even if it's a little bit more minor than, say, for instance, in the narrow passage, that there is also a risk of flooding along like the outside of the swamp area here.
Yeah, totally. So I think out of all of the places on the map, I think that the places that are going to have the most negative connotation are going to be city-states and city-state surrounding areas, the desert city, or at least the desert city pirates. The desert city itself might find them quite pleasant, but the pirates don't. And then the swamp area. I think everywhere else, is going to be either pretty neutral about the whole thing, or positive. So that was kind of what I wanted to establish, because I just didn't want everyone to like it.
Totally.
I think it's just more interesting, and it feels more realistic for some places to disagree on the presence of this turtle. And so that's kind of what I wanted to establish. That makes a lot of sense.
And it also kind of makes you think on the flip side of that coin too. For the people that live on here, they are going to potentially have, you know, times that are a little bit more dangerous for them as well. Because, for instance, if they're going past, you know, the city-states, and the city-states want to hop on this thing, harvest pieces of it or something like that, and they're obviously going to have to defend it. I'm also sure that it's capable of defending itself, but mostly, I'm sure that by now they would have figured out how to get past, like, its giant snapping turtle head, or like, you know, its fins or something like that. But we did talk about the people on this thing having harvested like the trees from the back of it and having like the nectar infused wood, and it can recognize that. So it'll like see them coming, it'll hear them coming, but or smell them coming, whatever. But after assumably many times of it going through here, they would have figured out how to somehow counteract that. So they'll still have certain times of the, you know, the year or the cycle where the people have actual like thoughts of defense and stuff like that, rather than just, oh, let's, you know, have a beautiful day or whatever, right? Because the turtle's going to defend itself, and I think thinking of the pirates are going to be the main ones. They're going to be there's treasure on that their turtle, so they want it, and so I think it's going to be 20 pirate ships enter, maybe 4 or 5 get through, and then you still have to worry about that. And so it's like the turtle's pretty good at defending itself for the most part, like, and so this place does kind of act as a sanctuary. But it's not like they're not going to not have to worry. So it's definitely a good point. It also does bring up the question how the people on the turtle actually view the outside world. Is it unanimously like, hey, everyone stay out? Do they like some people and not others? I think that there are definitely some people that they actually get along with and would want to send like envoys and stuff like that. They're able to hop on their own boats and sail out and trade for, like, say, things that they don't have on the island, like, oh, it's that time of year where we're finally able to go and trade with Feros and get like those delectable blueberries that we can't get here, or something like that kind of stuff. Or like, maybe there's not really much in the way of metal on this thing.
Yeah, fair enough.
And so they want to go trade with Yothamir or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think that they would have positive relationships with certain places.
Yeah.
And also like a nice good back and forth where everybody benefits. But then with certain places, they're just downright like, we're not interested, that's the enemy, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you think there would be anyone that they invite onto the turtle, or is it basically on like a person by person basis?
I think it'd be more person by person.
I would agree, I think too, because yeah, I don't think they would be completely like no outsiders.
Yeah.
Like no one ever. Like I feel like you could probably like marry in, but it's like it's a pretty fucking exclusive club.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of a question as well. It's like yeah, exactly how willing are they to, you know, invite someone in?
I think pretty minimally, mostly because there's not a whole lot of like opportunities to form really like meaningful, impactful relationships with them, considering that they're only coming through for a very brief window every so often.
Yeah.
But if somebody were able to, you know, make an impactful, meaningful relationship with them, then they're allowed. But it'd be pretty tough to be in that position.
It would also, I think, kind of be in a situation where it's like, okay, well, if you're coming with me, you got to convert.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You've got to be with the ways of the turtle people now, because if you're not, they're just gonna kick you back out. So okay, that definitely does make sense.
Like the Hotel California.
No,
You can stay, but you can never leave.
yeah. But yeah, okay, so that I think kind of handles exactly what I needed on just like outside exposure or outside effects that the turtle has on the rest of the world.
I was picturing like the city-state's like, okay, how are they gonna get past all these defenses and stuff? And after so long of trying and failing, that they've resorted to like Mad Max style boats. Like they've got these dudes on giant pole vaults to like jump from one ship onto the turtle, just totally Mad Max
just
style.
Huge slingshot.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, all right, you ready, Jim? Yeah. Thunk.
They got somebody dangling off the mermaid at the bow of the ship, or whatever, playing a guitar.
Yeah, they've just lost it. So they're like, dude, we'll try anything at this point. Yeah, I love that. But okay, so that does bring us to, okay, now we're on the turtle.
Yeah.
What are we gonna do about that?
So, I was picturing that everybody on the turtle, I would say that there's probably a handful of like bases of, you know, like civilization, like a few different points of population, and that they probably all get along pretty well. It's large, but it's not so enormous where you can afford to not get along.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I mean, that makes sense. I was kind of picturing there being like kind of maybe a max or baseline of about 3 main tribes, possibly. And then, yeah, they're going to have their interactions. They're going to have their subtle differences. Like one of them's, I think each of the 3 would have something semi-unique going for them. But yeah, realistically, like you don't live far enough away or outside of each other's reach enough for you to not try and separate your differences. Like, because you are pretty, it's like you're all part of the like same country. You're just 3 fucking towns. Like you're not even big enough to know, like not know everyone in each town, let alone half of the next. So yeah, that's kind of the general vibe I get. Like they might exist in enough distance where they kind of develop like a semi-unique something about them, but they just like it's close enough where they still have to they still consider themselves unified.
So I was thinking like if we're gonna have slightly unique tribes, that they could each have sort of like a slightly different trait based on different aspects of the turtle. Like maybe one tribe is a little bit more like they've kind of evolved by, you know, having smaller communities that mingle with each other a little bit more. They've developed maybe like webbed fingers and toes or something like that, and so they're like well renowned as like, oh, they're the best fishermen, like bar none on the island or something like that. And then one of them has something like, maybe not a full-on shell, but like, you know, hardened scales or something like that, and they're the warriors or something like that kind of thing. They've got different traits
I really like that idea. Yeah, totally. And I think it might actually. The thing that bothers me is like about that specifically, but I think is totally able to be fixed, is the fact that like they're not far enough away, I think, to develop like unique physical traits to each other. Like they are basically working in the same environment for the most part, but I think what would probably change that is not necessarily them like slowly evolving into this sort of different set of people, but maybe in the ways that they use this nectar.
Yeah.
So yeah, like picturing, okay, they have, one of them are superior swimmers with like webbed feet, maybe a few other sort of minor traits like that. One of them has harder, maybe not a shell, but like maybe just like plates, like just generally on places that aren't like their hands or underbelly or face. Then that also brought me to like, okay, you have sort of the nimble ones, the warrior ones, and immediately just my RPG brain trying to complete the triangles, like the mystic sort of ones, or the magic ones, which might be like some sort of very religious, or like they practice their practices with the nectar are more mystical.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
I absolutely had the exact same thought.
Yeah,
and I had even started thinking about that once we were talking about like tribes, and I thought, where would the locations be? And I was thinking, like, if there's gonna be some kind of like holy leader or like chief or something like that, from like the spiritual religious aspect, then it would be really cool for it to be like, maybe not necessarily the capital, but like a citadel or something like that, where like everybody's welcome, this is where we do the holy stuff, that kind of thing. My initial thought was like dead center, you know, like maybe on the tallest spike of the shell or something like that, the tallest ridge. But I actually think it would be pretty sweet if you did it like on the like ridge of the shell overlooking like where the head is.
I would agree with that. Yeah, totally.
That's super cool to me.
Well, because I feel like just naturally we have the inclination like tallest point is best point. But yeah, I think basically like you could pretty easily break these down, I think, into location, because picture like either on the head, which would be funny, but I think at the ridge of the shell is better. Yeah, because it probably wants to dip its
totally
head. Just
the head would be cool,
little city on his head,
but it's gonna move. Like let's say there's a ship incoming, and it's gonna go chomp the ship. Now all of a sudden, like your entire city is like, whoa! Like that's not particularly good for terrible for the real estate prices.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like it's semi-regularly you just bonk your head on the freaking ceiling of your house because the turtle dipped its head and you're like but yeah, so putting it at the close to the head, like head location, like absolutely right at the ridge of the shell is perfect for, I think, the mystics to stay, because like firstly it's kind of just like the mind as well. And then when it comes to the warriors, I pictured them at the top of the shell. Firstly because that's their shtick. Is the shell, and so like them being at the center and strongest part of the shell like makes the most sense to me. And plus like they're gonna be in the closest thing to mountains you get out of all these people, and so for them to be kind of tough and rugged makes the most sense to me, and also makes them the least water oriented. And then what
do you think if, rather than one specific centralized location for like the other people that are like the fishers and stuff like that, what if they have a handful of different small settlements just kind of around the outskirts, like close to the water? And then there's also kind of like an aspect of not necessarily classes, like middle class, low class, like that kind of classes. But there is like, you know, the small villages where maybe the largest population is like lives in those and does like that level of work, like they're fishers, they're harvesters, hunters, gatherers, and then there's like, you know, kind of like the warrior class, and they live up in the mountains and they commit to defending the turtle and that kind of thing. And then there's sort of like the holy class where they live in, maybe it's still not necessarily fancy, but like they live in sort of like the capital holy city.
Yeah, I was gonna say the fishers could be like at the bottom of the turtle, like right at the tail end.
Okay,
not under it. That would be kind of cool, but yeah, I don't think so. What I was kind of picturing is like this thing is going to leave a wake, and so stuff's gonna probably get caught in it. and be brought to the back, in which case they're like kind of capitalize on that. But I'm also like, everybody poops. So like, mayhaps their food source might not be best sourced from the back. But yeah, so the way you bring up like basically just like the side ridges, including the back, but just like that sort of area is where you'd find those sorts of people. Kind of makes the most sense to me for sure. It's going to expand a little bit. Spreads out a
little bit more rather than like three specific locations. There's like 2 bigger ones and then a handful of speckled smaller ones kind of thing.
I even think like there's probably going to be like, I do picture smaller villages, but I just do picture there only being like 3 main settlements. You could find like what you might define as like a hamlet, like just like virtually nothing, just a few people live here and kind of have this area. So yeah, I do picture there being like 3 of what you would call like the villages. But yeah, you'll have like little bits sprinkled all throughout. So I think that kind of solves itself. And I do picture in these villages intermingling between these types of people to a pretty decent degree. But I think it's just each of these villages has a specific practice with this nectar. And so it's like whatever village you kind of happen to be close to or in the greater area of, you more than likely go there to participate in the nectar rituals that they have to offer.
Yeah, so speaking of, when we think of like nectar rituals or uses for them that could potentially give you different traits, to have like scaly protective armor, it kind of makes me think rubbing it on your skin or something like that.
Yeah.
And then obviously if you're doing like holy rituals with it, then maybe you're not consuming it at all. Maybe you're using it as like some kind of incense or some kind of offering or something.
I would like, and basically anything that would turn into like a vapor or smoke. Kind of like speaks that for sure. I think.
And then maybe the like more fish-like people just straight up gobbling it. Or, you know, like using it as some sort of, maybe not necessarily seasoning or something like that, but it kind of maybe makes me think of like consumption. And then there's like the topical solution, and then the like vapor offering the smoke.
The inhalation. No, I was completely going to agree on that, because like the obvious one with like putting it on your skin, it feels like that's like kind of what would have. You could go with consumption because it's like, well, you know, that's going to have an effect on the exterior as well, but like that feels just
just feels like immediately the first
and then it's like they gotta smoke it if they're gonna get mystical. No, I did picture something more like they would put it, maybe it's like in like a sort of pot and they boil it, and then like the mist that comes off is some sort of incense or something like that. And then like I can't think of anything else other than consumption. So like that would obviously fall into, maybe it gives them maybe it'll give them more like a greater lung capacity or something like that too.
Absolutely.
It might have like sort of a whole body trait sort of thing because it's consumption. So we could go with that. Like the webbed hands and feet is just the easiest way to illustrate that, though. So we can just go with that. So no, that sounds absolutely perfect. I think.
And I think that they can like all sort of have like a blend of these traits, but you're gonna see like a sharper, like a more drastic effect. Like say if you go right up into like the sort of mountainous warrior people, that they have thicker, maybe slightly pointed or something like that, like almost scaled hide. And like only slightly webbed fingers and feet or something like that, versus the other way around.
Yeah, totally. No, I agree with that. And it is kind of cool to add like a level of like kind of sub-race to the whole thing, but it's not actually like genetic based. It's a choice of like how you choose to practice, and they have their own rituals, and they're all reverent to their basically their turtle god, but it's all in service to it in different ways, which I think is really cool. And I do like the idea. I don't want the exclusivity of them. Like it's gonna happen to be that more will be in an area just because of proximity. But you'll find the guys with the shell in the Mystic City constantly. Like it's probably gonna be like in any given city, probably like 60% of the main one, and like 20% of the other, and 20% of the other, or like any sort of mishmash of that sort of ratio. But I like to think that like they're cohesive enough of people that like that just still intermingles. It just depends on exactly how they choose to practice their rituals with the nectar, and so that's kind of cool as well.
And if you grow up a little fisher boy, and then you know, you start growing tall and strong and thinking of war, then hey man, you could do it. Just start rubbing it on your skin and like, you know,
little turtle boy Timmy thinking like, man, I want to do some war crimes. Like,
yeah.
Like, okay, well, we're gonna send you up to the mountains.
Yeah, you're not necessarily shoehorned into like being one or the other. Like, yeah, you'd be able to still. There's still time.
There's mobility amongst the. It's not classes of people because it's not like you. It's you can't go from here to here.
Yeah.
There, and I don't think there's going to be any sort of hierarchy among them either. It's just these are ways of life that allow the turtle to work its best. The collection of food, the protection, and the mysticism all kind of like fit these sort of basic needs of the people, and so they all are serving their central ecosystem in a way, which I think is really, really cool. Definitely.
Yeah, I think that's cool as well.
Yeah, so that does seem like a pretty cool way to sort of split up, add some diversity among the singular people.
Yeah, absolutely.
But to still keep them unified and
because they need all of these different aspects in order to keep like a truly functioning society. Because unfortunately for them, they do still need some defense from at least certain people who want to intrude on their way of life. Yeah. But they also need to eat.
Yeah.
So they need that, and then the more mystic side of it is kind of like the social, cultural side of it too, and they need people to like fulfill their lives and make them happy and content and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I think it does kind of check the sort of. They're very broad boxes, but they kind of check them off, and then the specifics just kind of happen inside the society.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's kind of a cool way to do that. I think we're kind of on our time for this episode, so I think we'll probably just continue. We're going to continue on the turtle. How so? We'll see in the next episode. But I think there's more to say. So we'll keep this going, and we'll be talking to you in the next one. See ya. Hey, thanks for watching. Welcome to the end card. Remember to like and subscribe. Check us out on Spotify if you like, and also check us out on Instagram. You can DM us on Instagram as well as comment on YouTube if you'd like to be featured in our little comments section here. But Tyler, would you like to kick it off?
Yeah, we've got one here from Michael Cap 9859. That chair looks like a PNG. It is. I've been holding that squat for 4 months. Thank you, Michael. It was a PNG all along. You got me.
Our budget only allowed for one chair, and I won the rock, paper, scissors.
What can you do? Small YouTube channel.
We got another comment here from Silly Guy Vids. Says, thanks. You're welcome, Silly Guy Vids. Thanks for watching.
Anyway, so that's what we got for you this week. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to be here next week, shoot us a comment or slide in our Instagram DMs. See you next time.
Thanks.